The most dangerous moment in your life is not when someone finds you. It is when nobody does. The wind cut through my coat like a blade of ice as I hurried down the narrow Manhattan side street, my boots splashing through slush left behind by an afternoon snowstorm. Midnight had already passed. Most people were home. The city still glowed around me, but the warmth of crowded restaurants and holiday lights felt a million miles away. My fingers ached from the cold. My stomach twisted with anxiety. I kept my head down and walked faster. I should never have taken this shortcut. I knew that the second I stepped into the alley. The bright avenue behind me disappeared. The buildings rose higher on both sides, blocking the light and turning the path ahead into a tunnel of shadows. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was tired, that I just wanted to get home after another exhausting shift. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, behind me. My pulse jumped instantly. I tightened my grip on my bag and kept walking. The footsteps continued, not rushing, not hiding, following. Every instinct inside me screamed that something was wrong. The cold suddenly felt heavier, the air thinner. I glanced over my shoulder. 3 figures emerged from the darkness at the far end of the alley. They were too far away for me to see clearly, but they were moving in the same direction I was, toward me. I turned forward and quickened my pace. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The sound of my boots striking the pavement echoed between the brick walls. I reached for my phone. No signal. Of course. The tall buildings blocked everything. Come on, I whispered to myself. Just get to the street. The exit was less than 100 feet away. So close. Yet it suddenly felt impossible to reach. Another set of footsteps appeared ahead. I froze. A silhouette stood near the mouth of the alley. Tall. Motionless. My breath caught. For one terrible second, I realized I was trapped between strangers behind me and a stranger in front of me. Snow drifted lazily through the air. The city noise faded until all I could hear was my own breathing. The figure ahead stepped forward. Not hurried, not aggressive, controlled, confident. The streetlight above flickered to life, casting a pale glow across his face. Black hair, sharp jawline, expensive overcoat, piercing blue eyes. The kind of eyes that noticed everything. Recognition hit me immediately. Ethan Blackwood. Even if you had never met him, everyone in New York knew the name. Power seemed to follow him like a shadow. The men behind me stopped walking. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Ethan's gaze moved from me to them. Calm, silent, unreadable. Yet somehow the entire alley felt smaller because of him. Snow settled on his shoulders as he took another step forward. Then his eyes returned to mine. For the first time since the fear began, I felt something else. Relief. But when Ethan looked past me once more, his expression darkened slightly, and I realized he had recognized the men standing behind me. Whatever happened next, this was no coincidence. The cold seemed to disappear the moment Ethan Blackwood stepped fully into the alley, the snow swirling around us like a silent witness. His coat brushed against mine as he extended a hand, firm and steady, guiding me toward the faint glow of the street beyond the shadows. I took it hesitantly, my fingers trembling from the chill and lingering adrenaline, and felt the immediate warmth of his grip, a stark contrast to the icy fear that had frozen me moments ago. Behind us, the men who had followed paused, uncertain under the weight of his silent authority, and the alley that had felt endless now seemed smaller, constrained by the presence of someone who belonged to a world completely unlike my own. Ethan did not speak, yet his gaze scanned the surroundings with precision, as if noting every exit, every surface, every potential obstacle, ensuring nothing could slip past his awareness. We stepped into the street together, the snow crunching beneath our feet, and for the first time since the danger began, I felt a measure of relief, though I could not yet trust it fully. He led me down a side street illuminated by sporadic streetlights reflecting off the freshly fallen snow, his movements deliberate, protective, creating a rhythm that both guided and reassured me. My breath came in shallow puffs, visible in the crisp air, and I realized how completely I had relied on him without knowing it. He glanced at me briefly, catching my eyes with a fleeting softness before returning to survey the surroundings, his face unreadable but protective, as if every instinct was tuned to ensure my safety. The city seemed quieter now, muffled by snow and distance from the main avenues, the usual hum of traffic and distant sirens replaced by the subtle creaks of frozen metal and soft whispers of wind. I felt my body relax fractionally as he guided me toward the faint outline of a parked black SUV, the warmth emanating from it a promise of temporary sanctuary. Ethan opened the door and gestured for me to enter first, his presence behind me forming an invisible shield as I stepped inside. The interior air hit me like a soft wave, heated and scented faintly of leather and cologne, a stark contrast to the biting cold outdoors. He slid in beside me, his posture composed yet alert, scanning the city through the tinted windows while my hands wrapped around the warmth of a steaming cup of tea that had been handed to me. Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but filled with an unspoken understanding. I could sense the depth of his vigilance, the calm that came from experience, the unwavering focus that had already ensured my safety. My heart rate slowed, though my thoughts raced, replaying the alley, the threat, and the sudden, surreal relief of having someone so entirely capable and determined watch over me. I realized in that quiet moment that trust was being established not through words, but through presence, through measured movement, through the silent communication of someone who had accepted responsibility for my well-being without hesitation. The snow fell outside, yet inside the SUV I was cocooned in warmth and protection, the tension easing as I sank into the leather seat, my gaze fixed on Ethan, understanding for the first time the full magnitude of his control, his awareness, and the silent promise that I was no longer alone in a city that could so easily swallow a person whole. The SUV glided through the quiet streets of Manhattan, the city wrapped in a soft blanket of snow, reflecting the streetlights in muted pools of gold and white. I held the warm cup of tea between my hands, feeling the heat seep into my fingers and chest, slowly replacing the lingering chill from the alley. Ethan Blackwood sat beside me, his posture composed yet alert, eyes scanning every movement outside with the intensity of someone who never allowed surprises. He finally spoke, voice low and controlled. "You cannot go back out there alone." I swallowed, realizing the weight behind the statement, the authority, and the underlying concern that I had not expected. The SUV made a turn into a side street, quieter, almost deserted, the snow drifting lazily in the air, muting all the usual city sounds. "Why are you helping me?" I asked hesitantly, my voice barely rising above the soft hum of the heater. Ethan's gaze met mine for a fleeting second before returning to the street. "Because you should not be in danger," he said simply. There was no need to elaborate. The certainty in his tone conveyed everything. The vehicle stopped outside a sleek, nondescript building, its modern facade faintly illuminated by the city glow. Ethan opened the door for me and gestured inside, the warm air rushing out to greet us like a protective embrace. I stepped in cautiously, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering tension, my senses still keyed to the vulnerability I had experienced moments ago. Inside, the lobby was quiet, sparsely furnished, yet every detail suggested control, order, and luxury. Ethan led me to a private elevator, and the way he moved, calm, deliberate, precise, communicated authority and reassurance simultaneously. As the doors closed, the reflection in the polished metal showed both of us, my face flushed from the cold and lingering fear, his expression unreadable but focused, eyes alert even in this small, enclosed space. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, I realized we had entered a sanctuary, soft lighting, warm tones, minimalist yet elegant decor, a space clearly designed to be secure, private, and welcoming. Ethan gestured for me to sit on a comfortable chair near the window overlooking the snow-covered city, and I obeyed, aware of the weight of every unspoken expectation, the silent protection he offered without a single word being wasted. He poured tea into another cup and placed it on the small table beside him before settling into the armchair opposite me, posture relaxed yet alert. For a long moment, we did not speak, the silence between us filled with an odd mixture of comfort and tension, an acknowledgement that the danger outside had passed for now, but the night had changed everything. I sipped the tea, feeling warmth spread through my body, and gradually noticed the subtle ways Ethan's attention remained focused on me, his eyes following my slightest movement, his stance always positioned to shield, to intervene if necessary. There was an unspoken understanding forming, fragile yet tangible, a trust that did not need to be named, but was quietly cemented in the way he guarded both my space and my presence. Outside, the city remained blanketed in snow, hushed and still, yet inside, every careful movement, every glance, every measured word reinforced the sense that I was no longer alone, that for the first time in hours, perhaps in days, someone was actively ensuring my safety and presence mattered. The safe house was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the polished wooden floors, the city outside coated in fresh snow and distant streetlights casting muted reflections through the large windows. Ethan Blackwood remained standing near the window, shoulders squared, scanning the quiet streets below, his posture precise, alert, a subtle tension in his jaw indicating the lingering awareness of danger that had not yet fully released him. I sat on a plush armchair, wrapped in a warm blanket, holding a steaming cup of tea that radiated comfort through my frozen fingers, and I felt the slow, calming effect of the safety he provided. The room was elegantly minimalistic, warm amber light reflecting on dark wood surfaces, every object placed with intention, yet the focus remained squarely on us, the quiet intensity of our shared presence filling the space. Ethan finally turned toward me, his gaze measuring, controlled yet softer than it had been on the street, and he motioned for me to move closer to the sofa near the fireplace. I obeyed, my steps careful, the warmth from the fire drawing me in, but also the understanding that he expected me to trust his guidance completely. He took a seat on the arm of the sofa, remaining close but not imposing, the quiet authority in his posture conveying reassurance without overt pressure. I could feel the subtle tension in the air, a residue of the alley and street encounter. Yet there was also a growing sense of stability, a protective energy that made the world outside fade to insignificance. "Tell me everything," he said, voice low and steady, eyes locked onto mine, compelling me to speak. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, then began recounting the events that had led me to that alley, the circumstances that had forced me out alone, and the quiet fears I had carried in the back of my mind for months. Ethan listened without interruption, absorbing each word, his expression carefully neutral yet attentive, occasionally glancing toward the windows to ensure nothing had changed outside. As I spoke, the tight knot of anxiety in my chest loosened, and I realized that my vulnerability in front of him was not met with judgment, but with consideration, calculation, and protection. He shifted slightly, bringing a notebook and pen to the side table, making notes of details, precautions, and contingencies, not to punish or control me, but to guarantee my continued safety. The firelight cast long, soft shadows across the room, dancing across his angular features, the tattoos glimpsed beneath the sleeves of his tailored coat, adding subtle texture to his presence, a reminder of the power and experience that underlay every word and action. Outside, the snow continued to fall in silence, but inside, a rhythm developed, my voice explaining, his attention guiding, the warmth of the room contrasting with the chill of the city, and a shared understanding forming that was both silent and profound. By the time I had finished, Ethan leaned back slightly, exhaling once, and a rare, almost imperceptible softness passed through his gaze. "You are not alone anymore," he said quietly, the words carrying weight and reassurance. I felt the first genuine relief of the night, knowing that while the city outside remained cold and unpredictable, here within these walls, I was protected, watched over, and, for the first time since the evening began, safe enough to breathe. The hours passed quietly inside the safe house, yet the calm felt fragile, as though the storm outside had merely changed form. The fire continued to burn in the hearth, filling the room with a steady warmth that contrasted sharply with the icy streets below. I sat near the window, watching snow drift past the glass while Ethan reviewed messages on his phone and occasionally spoke in low tones with members of his security team. Every conversation was brief, every instruction precise. Nothing about him felt rushed, yet everything seemed carefully managed. It was close to 2 in the morning when he finally set the phone aside and walked toward me. "You should get some rest," he said. I looked at him and shook my head. "I do not think I can sleep." A faint understanding crossed his face. "Because of tonight?" I nodded. The truth was more complicated than that. The fear from the alley had not completely disappeared. It lingered beneath the surface, hidden beneath the warmth and safety of the room. Ethan seemed to recognize that immediately. He pulled a chair closer and sat across from me. Then tell me what you were thinking. I stared at the snowfall for several seconds before answering. I keep wondering what would have happened if you had not been there. Silence settled between us. The fire crackled softly. Somewhere below, the city continued moving through the night. Ethan leaned back slightly. But I was there. The certainty in his voice made me look at him. That is what matters. Most people would have said something comforting, something polite. Ethan did not waste words on things he could not control. Instead, he focused entirely on what was real. What had happened? What came next? Strangely, that honesty calmed me more than reassurance ever could. Do you always carry the weight of every possible outcome? He asked. I smiled weakly. Maybe. That sounds exhausting. A quiet laugh escaped me before I could stop it. The sound surprised both of us. For the first time all night, the tension eased slightly. Ethan watched me carefully. There it is. What? I asked. The smile you have been hiding. I felt my cheeks warm. The observation was simple, yet it carried an unexpected sincerity. He stood and walked toward the kitchen area before returning with 2 fresh cups of coffee. The rich aroma filled the room. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the atmosphere felt lighter than before. We spoke for nearly an hour. Not about danger. Not about the men from the alley. Instead, we talked about ordinary things. Favorite places in the city. Childhood memories. The little routines people create to survive difficult days. I learned that beneath Ethan's reputation existed a man who noticed details others ignored. He remembered names, remembered conversations, remembered things people thought he had forgotten. As the night stretched toward dawn, I began to understand something unexpected. The safest part of the room was not the reinforced walls or the security team downstairs. It was the certainty that Ethan was paying attention, that nothing happening around me escaped his notice. Then his phone vibrated again. This time, when he read the message, his expression changed. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by sharp focus. He looked toward the window for several seconds before turning back to me. It seems tonight is not over yet, he said quietly. The early hours of the morning filtered through the large windows, casting pale light across the room, illuminating the delicate snowflakes still clinging to the city outside. Ethan Blackwood remained standing near the corner, eyes scanning every subtle movement beyond the reinforced glass, posture composed yet exuding an unmistakable intensity that suggested nothing escaped his attention. I sat closer to the fireplace now, the warmth finally reaching deep into my frozen muscles, hands wrapped around a fresh cup of tea, feeling the gentle pull of safety and quiet. Ethan walked over to a low table, retrieving a small notebook and pen, and motioned for me to sit comfortably while he made notes, his attention divided between what I had told him and the potential risks lingering beyond the safehouse walls. You trust me, do you not? He asked quietly, glancing up from his meticulous records. I nodded slowly, realizing that the feeling of security was new and fragile, yet undeniably present. Good, he said, the single word carrying weight beyond its simplicity. Outside, the city remained quiet under a blanket of white, the usual hum and clamor muted by snowfall and distance from the avenues, creating a cocooned silence inside the building. He gestured for me to relax as he retrieved a soft blanket, draping it gently over my shoulders, and I noticed the care in every movement, the way he seemed attuned not only to my safety, but also to my comfort. I allowed myself to lean back, inhaling the warmth and security, while Ethan remained standing, a silent guardian, his sharp blue eyes scanning the horizon, calculating and prepared for any sign of disturbance. Our conversation turned gradually to lighter topics, details of the city, places he frequented, memories from long before the storm, and I found myself listening, feeling the tension of the past hours slowly unwind. Each word he spoke carried authority, yet a subtle warmth that encouraged openness and shared understanding. The quiet intimacy of the moment did not escape me, a delicate balance of vigilance and care that created trust without a single explicit promise. Hours passed in this rhythm, punctuated only by the occasional glance toward the windows, the subtle movement of snow settling on the ledges outside, and the crackle of the fire. Ethan's presence remained a constant anchor, his awareness extending beyond what I could perceive, and I began to understand the depth of protection he provided, a mixture of strategy, observation, and instinct. By the time the first faint rays of sunlight crept along the skyline, I felt a measure of calm I had not known in weeks, a recognition that, although the night had been harrowing, the security and attention of Ethan Blackwood had transformed it into something I could survive, something I could begin to process. The room, bathed in soft morning light, seemed to hold the promise of clarity and the beginning of trust that extended beyond mere physical safety, an unspoken understanding forming between us that this night, and the vigilance it demanded, had changed everything. The morning had grown brighter, sunlight spilling through the tall windows and illuminating the room where Ethan Blackwood and I had spent the night. Yet despite the warmth, a tension lingered, subtle but persistent, reminding me that the events of the alley were not completely behind us. Ethan moved with deliberate precision, opening the blinds slightly to gauge the streets below, scanning for any hint of movement that might indicate a lingering threat. I watched him, noticing the careful way he adjusted his stance, the slight narrowing of his eyes that suggested calculation and anticipation. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the side table, and he picked it up, his gaze shifting sharply to the screen. I could sense the change before he spoke, a shift in the atmosphere, a quiet alertness that made my pulse quicken despite the morning calm. "There are people observing you," he said, voice low but steady, and the words sank in with a chill. My stomach tightened, uncertainty curling through me. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. Ethan set the phone down, eyes meeting mine with intensity that left no room for misunderstanding. "They know your routines, your routes, your movements," he explained. "They have been waiting for an opportunity, and tonight, they may see one." I shivered, the warmth of the room suddenly insufficient, but he remained composed, every motion controlled, deliberate. "Then what do we do?" I whispered. He walked closer, a silent presence looming, and crouched slightly so his gaze met mine directly. "We control the situation," he said. "You will stay here, under protection, until I am certain no one can reach you. Not tonight, not ever if I can prevent it." His voice carried authority that resonated deep within me, the kind of command that left no room for argument, only trust. Outside, the city appeared peaceful under a layer of snow, yet the knowledge that danger lingered, unseen, made the silence heavier. I realized that his vigilance was not merely precautionary. It was active, dynamic, the result of experience and instinct honed to ensure safety. Hours passed with measured conversation and careful observation, Ethan instructing his team through discreet calls, the faint hum of devices filling the background without breaking the intimate atmosphere of the room. Each glance, each gesture reinforced the unspoken understanding that I was no longer navigating the city or my fears alone. Even as sunlight brightened the space, the reality of potential threats hung just beyond the windows. And yet, paradoxically, I felt safer than I had ever felt before. Ethan remained beside me, both shield and anchor, eyes continually scanning, mind calculating, and I began to accept the weight of his protection as both promise and comfort. The morning air, tinged with the scent of snow and winter streets, streamed through a slightly open window, brushing against our skin as a reminder that the world outside continued its indifferent motion. Yet within these walls, strategy, care, and vigilance formed a sanctuary that allowed me to breathe and begin to trust fully in the presence of someone wholly capable of guarding me. The atmosphere inside the safe house shifted sometime after noon. It was subtle at first, almost impossible to identify. The sunlight still reflected off the snow-covered rooftops outside. The fireplace still glowed softly. Yet Ethan Blackwood had become quieter, more focused. Every few minutes his phone vibrated. Every few minutes another brief message appeared on the screen. I watched him from across the room as he stood near the window, one hand resting in his pocket while the other held his phone. His expression never revealed much, but I had spent enough hours around him now to notice the difference. Something had changed. Finally, he set the phone down and looked directly at me. "How are you feeling?" he asked. The question seemed ordinary, yet there was purpose behind it. "Better," I answered honestly. "A lot better." He nodded once. "Good." Silence followed. Then he walked toward the fireplace and rested one arm against the mantel. "There is something you should know." My stomach tightened slightly. What is it? For a moment, he studied the flames. The people who were paying attention to you are no longer paying attention. I frowned. What changed? Ethan's gaze lifted toward me. They learned you are under my protection. The room became very still. I was not sure why those words affected me so strongly. Perhaps it was the certainty behind them. Perhaps it was the realization that he had acted without hesitation from the moment he found me. And that is enough? I asked quietly. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. For most people, yes. There was no arrogance in the statement. Only confidence. Absolute confidence. The kind earned through experience rather than reputation. I looked away, trying to process everything that had happened during the past 24 hours. Yesterday, I had been alone, exhausted, and frightened. Today I sat inside one of the safest buildings in New York beside a man who seemed capable of bending chaos into order through sheer determination. Ethan crossed the room and handed me a small envelope. What is this? I asked. Open it. Inside was a key card. Elegant. Black. Minimalist. I looked up in confusion. The apartment next to this building, he explained. It belongs to me. My eyes widened. Ethan, I cannot accept that. You are not accepting anything. His voice remained calm. You are borrowing it until you decide what comes next. I stared at the key card. Why would you do this for me? For the first time all day, his composure softened completely. Because everyone deserves somewhere safe to go. The answer was simple. Honest. It carried no expectation. No condition. Just quiet sincerity. Outside the window, sunlight sparkled across fresh snow. The storm that had seemed endless now felt distant. Ethan glanced toward the skyline before looking back at me. You survived a difficult night, he said. Now give yourself permission to build a better tomorrow. As I held the key card in my hand, something inside me finally settled. Not because every problem had disappeared, not because every question had been answered, but because for the first time in a very long time, the future no longer felt like something I had to face alone. 1 year later, snow fell gently across Manhattan once again, covering the city in the same quiet white that had changed my life forever. I stood near the edge of Bryant Park, watching people laugh as they crossed the ice rink. Their voices carried through the cold afternoon air. The city looked different now. Or maybe I did. The fear that had once followed me through empty streets had been replaced by something steadier. Confidence. Peace. Hope. I adjusted my scarf and smiled as I looked toward the avenue. Right on time. Ethan Blackwood stepped from a black SUV parked across the street. Some things never changed. He still carried himself with the same calm authority, the same quiet confidence, the same ability to make an entire crowd seem smaller simply by walking through it. Yet there was something different too. The sharp edges that had once separated him from everyone else had softened. Not disappeared, just softened. His eyes found mine immediately. They always did. As he crossed the street, snowflakes settled on the shoulders of his dark coat. You are early, he said. By 2 minutes, I replied. A rare smile appeared. I knew you would notice. We began walking through the park together, neither of us in a hurry. Around us, the city moved at its usual pace. Taxi horns echoed in the distance. Holiday lights shimmered beneath the gray winter sky. The world continued exactly as it always had. Yet for me, everything had changed. The apartment Ethan had offered had become more than temporary shelter. It had become a starting point, a place where I rebuilt my life, a place where I learned that accepting help did not make someone weak. It made them human. We stopped near a row of snow-covered trees. Ethan looked toward the skyline. Do you ever think about that night? He asked quietly. I followed his gaze toward the city beyond the park. Sometimes. He nodded. So do I. The answer surprised me. Ethan rarely spoke about himself. And? I asked. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he looked directly at me. I think it reminded me that power means very little if you never use it to protect someone. The sincerity in his voice settled deeply inside me. Because that was exactly what he had done. Not through grand speeches. Not through promises. Through actions. Through presence. Through showing up when it mattered most. Snow drifted between us as silence settled comfortably once again. The same kind of silence we had shared beside the fireplace a year earlier. Familiar. Peaceful. Real. Then Ethan extended his hand toward me. I took it without hesitation. Together we continued walking through the falling snow, leaving a trail of footprints behind us. The city lights slowly began to glow as evening approached, turning the streets gold against the white winter landscape. For the first time in my life, the future no longer felt uncertain. It felt open, bright, full of possibility. And as I walked beside the man who had once appeared in the darkest moment of my life, I realized something simple and beautiful. Sometimes the people who change your world do not arrive with promises. They arrive with protection, kindness, and the quiet decision to stay. And in the end, that changes everything.